Can I just have your attention, everyone, please? There's great conversation happening, so I hate to interrupt, but I just want to, on behalf of the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, welcome the Mary Mulvihill Association here this evening and invite and welcome all of you to Dais. My name is Eucharia Meehan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO of Dais, and we're absolutely delighted to be hosting this event again this year. Sadly, I couldn't be with you last year, so I'm very pleased to be here this evening. Mary was a great friend to the Institute, and throughout her career in journalism would have engaged with us on quite a few occasions in terms of covering the type of work that we do. Mary understood what we did in that we were following a path, conducting fundamental research, and that's not something that you can take for granted, that journalists and people that you engage with actually do understand that. She very much understood that much of what we did was theoretical. For example, through our theoretical physics, we are looking at the underlying mathematical principles of nature and the universe, that we were studying the universe, the planets, the solar system, our own planet, both in theoretical and observational terms, and that indeed we then had an interest in looking at our Celtic heritage and our identity. So she very much understood us, and we loved working with her and we loved her. So that makes me especially pleased that we are hosting these events that we did last year, and that indeed that we are doing so again this evening. So without further ado, I'm just going to say I hope you all enjoy the event. I hope you enjoy being here at Dais, and I'm going to hand over now to Brian to get the proceedings underway properly. Okay, thank you everyone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Dolan. I'm a patron of the Mary Mulvihill Association and currently the chair of the association. I'd like to thank Eucharia and Dais for hosting us this evening. We have two back-to-back events tonight. The Mary Mulvihill Award, which will be announced and presented here, but also the Science and Culture Talk. The Science and Culture Talk will be first. This was inaugurated last year by Brian Trench and sponsored by the Irish Times. So the Science and Culture Talk will be given by Niamh Shaw, who's very well known. In some ways, I think Niamh's career actually paralleled Mary's. She started off as doing engineering at UCD, and she's been acting and a comedian, and now is mostly, I think, dedicated to science communication, STEM communication. She won a Science Foundation Ireland Outstanding Contribution to STEM Communication, an award in 2018, and she's contributed to the International Space Studies Programme. And interestingly, she was part of a simulated Mars mission in 2017 in Utah. I presume they chose Utah because the rocks are red. Yes. I've been to Utah. I've not been to Mars. Okay. So the first half hour will be Niamh's Science and Culture Talk, and then we'll go on to the actual award itself, which will be presented by Hannah Daly. So I'll hand over to Niamh now.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Let me just get my slides up. 1 second now. There, and let me share my screen and do this and do this and this, and that's it. Great. Okay, I can hear myself, so I'm gonna just yeah. So I'm gonna start here. Yeah. So I just want to say before I start that Mary was very good to me. She gave me my first start as a science communicator. I was coming out of acting. I had my stint on Fair City, and I realised like I wanted to do more than that with my brain, and I wanted to be a science communicator. I didn't really know how to do that. Contacted Brian, had a conversation with him, about DCU. And then I somehow found Mary on the internet, and I rang her, and the next thing, she had me on Quantum Leap on the radio, and we were talking about the best invention for society or something, and Lynn Parker for Rough Magic was on the panel with me, and a very young Michael John Gorman, who had not yet set up a science gallery, and it was soon to come. So, at the time I knew who Lynn was, but I didn't understand how extraordinary Michael John's career would go. So, and then she had me reviewing books for Quantum Leap, and she just took me into the fold and always kept an interest and always encouraged me. And it was a real gift, because I really didn't know where to start. And I think without her, it would have taken me a lot longer. So I'm absolutely delighted to be given the opportunity to speak at this event, because she had an effect on many of us here in the room. So I was asked to think about a topic, and I guess a good fit would be, the arts and space, because that's kind of the world that I live in. I absolutely am obsessed with space, and I also have a kind of a human. I'm most interested in the human stories behind space exploration and space discoveries, and there's so much to talk about in this topic. I'm keeping it to 20 minutes, but it's. Let me see what's going on here. So it's vast, and what I've done is I've just given you sort of a slight kind of just a taste of all the different things that are happening and where it kind of began critically. So why there's arts in space is the same reason why there is science in space. It's really to try to understand who we are and where we belong in the cosmos. And the artists that are interested in space, they're trying to answer the same question that scientists effectively are. And it's a fundamental part of our self-expression. Through the dawn of time, we've always expressed ourselves creatively. We have artifacts, and we have lots of cave paintings and carvings in stone all throughout the years. So that's part of it. So when we look at the art of that time, a lot of different cultures have paintings of adoring the sun or adoring the moon, and we have monoliths, we have tiles and stuff representing that as well. So it didn't just happen when we suddenly sent a human to the moon in the 1960s. It's been all the way through the ages. All different civilizations have mapped the stars. They've given them different names. We've always been categorizing. We know we have Newgrange and everything. So yes, it's a scientific pursuit, but there's also something very human and cultural coming from that. And so that's the arts. And now up to modern day, we have artists going to the moon on the very first mission of a lunar mission by SpaceX, when they finally kind of finish all the testing of their starship. And one of those ladies is Irish. That's Rhiannon Adam on the right hand side. She specializes in what she calls mechanical photography, so not digital photography. She uses those kind of instamatic kind of photographs, and her work is really just about looking at people in different guises. So I interviewed her for the Irish Times, and she is one of the official crew that will be going whenever that happens. They reckon, if we are to understand and appreciate the timeline that's been shared to us from Elon Musk, they say it's in kind of 2 to 3 years' time. So we'll see. So anyway, so that's where it's gone from, so it's very much art has really claimed its place in the story of space. And I really like what Roger Molina said. So Roger Molina was a scientist very much involved in the search for extraterrestrial, SETI and METI and all that. And he set up the Leonardo Association, and formerly MIT, qualified, and a PhD from Berkeley. And he really believes that, the creation of contemporary art is linked to us as human beings, and space art is a form of contemporary art, which requires us to explore and have activities in order for it to occur. So there's this notion, I think, that a lot of people from the arts would say that they're inspired by space, but then people involved in space would also say they're also inspired by the art. So it's a kind of a chicken and egg thing, and it's a symbiotic relationship that very much the imagination of artists and writers has sometimes inspired actual inventions to happen. And I want to give you evidence of that. So there are so many different forms of space art, as indeed there are so many different forms of art itself. So these are kind of what I'm going to try and cover in this review. So fine art, so that's painting and sculpture, which explores kind of the sensory experiences that we have when we explore space. Art, which expresses kind of the psychological feeling of being in space, or the philosophical concepts of what it would be like to go to space or to have humans in space. Then you actually have art that's in space that we view from Earth, and then you have art on Earth that's viewed from space, and then you have art in space viewed from space. And then you have also applications of art, which is like architecture, interior design, furniture design that's been inspired by space. And then you have art that's inspired by materials that have evolved from us having to understand how we can help humans survive on off Earth. So I've tried to think of examples of all of that to kind of tell that story. So firstly, a lot of people would be inspired by science fiction. It's impossible to talk about space art without mentioning Jules Verne, From the Earth to the Moon, and particularly this movie, which is Le Voyage dans la Lune, which was created in 1902 by a French filmmaker called Georges Méliès. And it's on YouTube. You should watch it. It's like 13 minutes long, and they're shot in a cannon to the moon. And on the moon, there's people that live there, and they try to bring one of them back. And it's revolutionary. A lot of people consider it to be the very first science fiction film, and it actually inspired a lot of people going forward in their filming techniques. He just basically used like a kind of a theatre set, but it was so imaginative. This is them traveling towards the moon. So very smart ideas. And one of the iconic images is this face that's on the moon as they arrive there. So watch it. I think it's like 13 minutes long or something. It's lovely. I watch it from time to time. And then you can't talk about space art without talking about 2000 AD, A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. And I was very lucky last year when I was teaching on the space studies program. They got a writer from the New Yorker who is obsessed with this movie and managed to interview Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke about the movie and the making of the movie, and he's kind of written a whole book about it. And so he was able to describe that while Kubrick was making the movie, Clarke was actually writing the book at the same time, and it was a totally symbiotic relationship between the two of them in terms of creating the body of work that became the book, but then also became the movie. And what's really interesting about the movie is that there were iPads on it. There are notions still that we're trying to evolve in terms of space exploration, which is to have these centrifugally designed spacecraft so that we can simulate gravity. And so a lot of inventions and solutions that came from this movie were then evolved into kind of space technology in terms of spin out and stuff. And then actual art that went to space, this is contentious. This one is actually contentious. This is the Moon Museum, and this is a tiny little chip where the leading artists at the time were asked to draw something or create something on this tiny chip, and it was a tiny piece of ceramic. It was seemingly brought on the Apollo 12 mission. So that was the mission after we had the first humans on the moon, being Neil Armstrong. Sorry, I've been up since 5. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And you can see they're all like heavy hitters: Andy Warhol, Rauschenberg, all the people at the time, and they're just like little diagrams and stuff. So some people feel that that's not really the first piece that was brought to space, because it was sort of, they just drew on a tiny ceramic. They didn't really respond to space, they feel. So the one that people really feel was the first piece of art that was brought to the moon was a part of the Apollo 15 mission, which was a memorial really for the astronauts that had lost their lives in getting that far to the moon. So there's 12 names on it. Some of them are cosmonauts and some of them are astronauts on this plaque. And at the same time, they got a Belgian artist, Paul van Hooijdonk, to make this little sculpture. And that was secretly brought on the mission, on the Apollo 15 mission. And it was only when they actually returned that the astronauts admitted that they brought that with them, and they actually placed it in front of that memorial plaque. And it's an interesting story that the artist was delighted to do it. And there is one replica, I think, in one of the American museums. And he was hoping that he could mass produce some copies of it in order to be able to make a book out of it, because all artists are essentially poor unless they get a patron. But that wasn't allowed because you're anything to do with space, particularly with the government agency, it can't be for profit. So it was kind of contentious in the end, and he gave up. And so there's only 2 of those in the world. One is on the moon and one is in one of the museums. So and then other examples of space art is some sculptures have flown to space. This first one, called SPACE, was brought up in 1984, and what it was a contraption that was full of, you know, air when it went up, and then there was a valve that was opened, and when they were in space, what happened was the air from Earth was extinguished, and so it was felt that air from space then occupied the interior of this glass dome, and then that came back down to Earth. So there is outer space in the glass dome. That's what that was called, SPACE. And then another piece which was full of prisms that actually flew in 1989, which was the boundless cubic lunar aperture, and that was considered that flew on the space shuttle in 1989 as well. So there are sculptures, and then I could do a whole talk about all the art that's actually traveled on spacecraft. I've just picked 3. One, which is my absolute favorite mission of all time, which is Voyager, and Voyager flew in 1978, and it was at the very start a very human mission because of the involvement of Carl Sagan and his wife to be eventually, Annie Dryan, and they really wanted to send out something to an intelligent species to say, we are here. They recorded people's voices saying hello from planet Earth. Their son was one of them, and in all different languages, and they had pictures and images and explained like how our civilization works. And then they realized that the only way for it to travel safely to the distances that it was going was actually to make it from gold. And you know, there were coordinates about where Earth is and instructions about how you actually create a record player. And then of course, you know, that's then inspired. What's really interesting about the Voyager mission, that has then inspired movies like The Farthest, which is a stunning piece of work by Emer Reynolds. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you have. And it was about basically telling the story of the people who were involved in the Voyager mission from start to finish. And you know, it still continues, Voyager, you know, 45 years later, and it's in interstellar space right now, and it still has those records on board, the two missions, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. So beautiful. And then this has kind of just become normal now. Like, it's rare in the last 10 years for any mission to go to space without there being some human representation. So the last rover that landed on Mars, in Perseverance, had a lot of art on board. The first one is that when the rover was actually landing down onto the Martian surface, the parachute that was deployed had coded sequence in it, and that's why the parachute was all different colors. And when it was decoded, it said "Dare Mighty Things," which was the tagline for that mission. And of course, then a lot of people were able to send their name to Mars, and I was one of them. And that was etched then on one of these plaques that was just placed on the rover itself. And I think there's 10 million names on 3 kind of zip drives just there. You can see them there on that there. And then closer to home, we've done the same thing. We have the amazing AirSat-1 satellite, which will be deploying later this year, hopefully August or September. And they did a beautiful piece of outreach, and they worked with schools and artists, and they wrote a poem, the space poem, the AirSat space poem. And then it's been beautifully etched on one of the sides of the AirSat satellite by Emer O'Boyle. So when it goes, that will be our contribution to art in space. And then in terms of photography and media, there's a beautiful story from Africa. A Zambian science teacher really wanted to kind of set up a space agency. And so, you know, he prepared the students in his school for space. And then this other artist, Christina de Medel, then responded to that. And she did the series of photographs called the Afronauts, where, you know, she combined the culture of Zambians with all the paraphernalia of astronauts, which was this glass dome. And they were a beautiful series of photographs. So there it's like an elephant's tusk kind of cradling the helmet planet, which is very nice as well. And then art has obviously been in space, like fine art. So we're talking about paintings and different drawings and such. And there was actually an art exhibition on the Mir space station. So the Mir space station was a very sturdy space station that predated the International Space Station, which currently orbits Earth as we speak, as does the Chinese space station. Last night, 3 taco nuts went up there. And the Mir space station actually had an art exhibition when it was up there, and I don't think I have audio playing, but they actually announced the winner of the art exhibit there, and they're all the pieces that flew, and they actually made a wall and they exhibited them, and it was broadcast live all over the world, which at the time was like cutting edge to be able to do that live via satellite. So 81 artworks were then displayed on the Mir. And then on the International Space Station, we have a former astronaut, Nicole Stott, who really has become an artist in her own right after her experience on the space shuttle. She always kind of did a few watercolors, but she was completely inspired by the views of Earth from the International Space Station. And she actually painted a watercolor in space. I've seen it. It's amazing. And I had to ask her, like, how does the paint work? You know, how do watercolors work with the absence of gravity? And she said that what you do is you put water on the brush, and then you would just literally have to make contact with the color, and then it would just like travel across as a blob on the brush, which is kind of deadly. So even to paint, and I said to her, so do you actually have to like touch the paper? And she said, no, you literally like let the water transfer across and let the water absorb the paint. You don't actually dab at all. So even to paint in space is a completely different experience. So she talks about that, and she's done a lot of space art activities and outreach to encourage people to bring the arts to space. And then this was an amazing piece of art if it had happened. So this was the orbital reflector by an artist called Trevor Pagan, and it was deployed by SpaceX on the spacecraft, but it never actually got unfolded properly, because it happened at a time when we had the shutdown of all the government. Remember at the start of 2019, and so it's up there, but it never actually got to do what it was supposed to do, which was supposed to be a reflector, and we were supposed to be able to see it reflected, the sun reflected down at us at different times. So that never happened anyway, but that's the orbital reflector. And then there's some really interesting people making kind of living sculptures or experiences. And Thomas Saraceno is an Argentinian artist and also an engineer. And he really is he really wanted to recreate what it would be like to be weightless and to be above the planet. So he created In Orbit, which was a kind of a series of mesh and kind of cellophane objects that you could walk across, and you could just float there and sit there. And this was a piece that traveled across many museums over the years. And he also has Cloud City, which also has been exhibited at the Metropolitan Museum in 2012, and I think it's currently in Brazil. And then he then kind of shifted more into the use of space and the use of thinking that way, of using atmospheres to conserve energy. And he created the Aeroscene project, which is a project where it has a kind of a dark undersurface that gets heated by the sun, which creates a balloon to lift in the sky. And what he likes doing is that the balloon rises in the air, it travels a certain distance. When the sun sets, it drops down. The next day it rises naturally, and it's traveling all around the world. And that's the Aeroscene project from Tom Saraceno. And then locally in 2018, we had a very interesting exhibit at the Science Gallery called Life at the Edges, and it gathered together, I think, by 20 or 30 artists who all responded to space in different ways. We have Micha Turish, who he brought like these teeny tiny worms that can actually survive in space, and he wants to set them free and see how they survive in space. We had architects that were they were creating structures that were hanging from an asteroid, and that you would be able to live in them because they would drop down from the sky onto Earth. And then we obviously had some art, and then I had an exhibit as part of that, which was a response to my simulated Mars mission. I wanted people to feel what it was like to be in this confined space and what your daily routine and stuff would be there. And I stayed there. I kind of did a sort of a simulated mission for a while when I was there. And then the notion of making art in zero gravity, or the absence of gravity, is also what artists are involved in. And there's a Mexican artist called Nahum, and he put together a group of artists from Mexico, and he got funded for them to go up on a zero gravity flight and basically to try out their artistic responses, I guess. And it was all about gravity and the absence of gravity. And he feels that when we dream, we remember what we were like before we felt gravity, which is, he feels, is the moment that we were born. And his particular project was trying to hug in the absence of gravity, and it was incredibly difficult, because if you try to hug somebody, you're going to go flying. So you can't actually grab anyone, because your momentum is going to push you in another direction. So it was really interesting. And then there was people who had like egg timers, and of course the egg timer isn't falling, it's just sort of spinning, and water and beautiful objects, and that's matters of gravity. There's if you Google that, you'll see the full exhibit of pieces that were on that there. So. And then I've seen sculpture in space. So again, Arthur Woods, he'd be a well-known artist in the space art community. He put a sculpture in space called Cosmic Dancer, and again, that flew on the Mir, and the astronauts were great. They just left it there, and he responded to the microgravity conditions of the Mir space station in creating that. And then beautiful dancers have tried to. They want to perform a full dance piece in the absence of gravity, and this is Star Dancer, which is from the 80s, as far as I know, which was a collaboration with a choreographer and an author. And having been on a microgravity flight, believe me, that is not possible. Like, you really have to understand your center of gravity and be able to move to have that level of control, because I was lucky to just firstly not vomit, and secondly just to be able to go from A to B. Like, it isn't graceful like that. And then in the modern era, then you've got pop videos. OK Go did their Upside Down video, and again they were on a zero gravity flight, the Aleutian, the same one that I was on, and they just kept having like 30 or 40 seconds of microgravity, and they'd reset, and that's what they did. So you should watch that. That's a really, really inventive use of zero gravity. And then this is an amazing. So this is an art piece where you can see the art from space. So Inza is an anonymous artist, a bit like Banksy, and he worked with a group of Brazilians, and they basically painted a patch of ground, derelict ground, in pink and yellow, and they waited for the satellite to go across, and the satellite took a picture. And then the very next day they came back and they painted it again. And what they did was they shifted the yellows one half, and then the pinks one half, so that it was the same pattern, but it was just shifted one way to the left. And they painted it, and again they waited for the satellite to fly over again to take the second picture. And they did that, I think they did it over 4 days. And then by the end of it, I'll just fast forward because it's sort of the same thing repeated. And then by the end of it, this is the last one happening, I think, here. Let me just see. Yeah, by the end of it, they created a GIF. So it's 546, World's Largest Animated Painting, or a GIF. And so if you repeat them, what happens is you get a GIF. Deadly, isn't it? I just love that. It's really inventive. And that's Inza. He's a very smart person. So people are responding to satellites and to space, and they're using their own artistic expression to do that. This is the Museum of the Moon. If you were in Cork in 2017, that was brought as part of the Cork Midsummer Festival to celebrate the Space Studies program coming to Cork. And this was, as far as I know, I think it's a 5 meter square inflatable with accurate mappings of the surface of the moon, and lit from the inside. And it's by an artist from Bristol called Luke Jerram, and he was very smart. He had this ready to go for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo mission, so it's traveled the world. I've seen it now 3 times in different places. It also went to the Galway Arts Festival, and this is it in the church in Strasbourg where I now live, as part of a Cosmos exhibition last year. And it's really mesmerizing. It's you can see that when you actually take a picture of it, it comes out blue, even though when you're there, it's grey. And when it was in Cork, the way it was situated in the room, they didn't have the height, so the bottom of the moon was kind of maybe like a foot or maybe half a meter off the ground. And I spoke with Niall Smith. He gave a talk just about his career, and he got up and he was able to give a kind of a live talk about where the Apollo landed and everything, because we had this massive demonstration right in front of us. So it was brilliant. And then what's been happening is I'm nearly finished, which is great because I'm looking at the time. There have been attempts to have artist in residence programs, but they still haven't cracked it. The notion of just keeping an artist on site. So Laurie Anderson, who would be, you know, an American artist and very well respected, she spent time at NASA on an artist in residence program, and she said she was completely uninspired by it. She got nothing from it whatsoever, and I'm not really sure why. She really tried, and because nothing was created out of it, I think NASA hasn't done it again. But I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. They will repeat it. And then, in comparison, then the European Space Agency ran an artist in residence program in collaboration with a Swiss agency who run artist in residence programs at CERN and different institutes around the world. And Aoife is an artist from Cork, and she's very interested in the early beginnings of the universe. So her art is explosive art. And I saw her final piece at ESA, and it was incredible. And she actually did it as well in Trinity, I think on the 10th anniversary of Science Gallery. Did you see it? It was amazing, wasn't it? And so Aoife is into explosive art. I think her work has shifted now, but so she was very inspired by it. And the point of it is that to have conversations so that, yes, she's inspired, but also the scientists are inspired themselves and they think about their own creative expression. And this has been really successful at CERN, and the Arts at CERN program has invited artists, and they have bursaries for residencies of up to 3 to 6 months. And it has been found that the scientists that they work with become just as inspired as the artists who are there. So that's the real sweet spot about artists in residence. And then JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, also have one too. So maybe one day they'll have an artist in residence on the ISS. I'd take a crack at that. I'll tell you if I could get it. And then, you know, and it's so funny, you know, when I gave this talk and part of this talk in 2017, and when I put up that artist in residence at the ISS question mark, it seemed the furthest thing from the truth. And yet here we are, and there are actually a group of artists going to the moon on a SpaceX Starship spacecraft, and they're all artists, and they're there to basically respond to the experience of the Earth from a distance, but also the moon, and just like all going in a spaceship together. So I think that's enough of my time there. I just want to leave you with this amazing quote from the amazing Michael Collins, who was the third member of the first team that landed on the moon. I think a future flight should include a poet, a priest, and a philosopher. We might get a much better idea of what we saw if we bring them. So I say hear, hear, and thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Niamh. That was fascinating for me. I learned lots of stuff there.
Iceberg. Really tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
Before we move on to the second part of this evening, we'll maybe get a few minutes if anyone wants to ask Niamh any questions. To open a discussion.
About your own heroic quest to get outside the Earth's gravitational field, which I think it's fantastic that you've sort of hung a whole career of that ambition in ways that actually have grown and resonated and become, it's a very simple idea, but you've enriched it hugely. But are we going to kind of see you, up there?
Well, I'd love to come, and I, you know, it's funny. It started as a sort of a realization in 2011 when I was making the first show. That's about the size of it, and then it was like, well, I'll give it a go, and maybe it'll go away. And it was never about being an astronaut or being the first person. It was always about something about what happens when you actually activate something that you've always wanted to do. That's where it's kind of became. And I feel like it's really important to kind of tag on the whole story of space and the science communication part of it, because otherwise then there's been so many people. There's like, I think 40 people went up last year, and most of those were commercial people, and they come and go. And a lot of people don't feel the impact of that. So you have to think of a smarter way to catch that experience and to share it. So I think science communication is something that I think is a part of it, and reporting. So I really believe the more the ISS becomes a commercial place and the more commercial astronauts come up, eventually they're going to say, we have to put a reporter up there or somebody that can actually kind of describe the experience. And so all the work I do now is kind of credentializing myself and doing my very best work to build up like a portfolio, so I get my name on this list when they go, oh, it has to be Niamh Shaw. So I wanted to be not just about, oh, I went, it has to be about like bringing people with me to see that view together. Because if I just go on my own, what's the point of that? You know, it's that view that everybody talks about that changes their whole perception of us as a species and our part in taking care of our planet, and, you know, the impermanency of our existence and how lucky we are to be here. So I would like to kind of spend time having that conversation with as many people as possible before I go up, and connecting with them, so that when I go up, they'll go, I knew her, she turned up in my town hall in Sligo, and, you know, that's what I want, you know. So thanks for letting me plug that. That was great.
Okay, thanks, Niamh. Well, now maybe we should move on to the second part of this evening's presentations. Thank you, Niamh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the second half is the actual announcement and presentation of the 2023 Mary Mulvihill Award for Science Communication. The award was set up in 2016. This is our 7th Mary Mulvihill Award. It was set up to try and to continue Mary's legacy of communicating science to the general public, and in particular to highlight Irish science. Actually, part of Mary's passion was to publicise Irish science, because Ireland is famous as the land of saints and scholars, but many people don't think about the good science that Ireland produces. So this evening's award, I'll hand over to Cormac Sheridan, who's our award coordinator and a member of the Mary Mulvihill Association. He's on the committee. So I'll just hand over to Cormac, and Cormac can introduce Hannah and say a few words about the award.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you, Niamh, and thank you everybody for coming here. Great to see you all out on a beautiful sunny evening, and it's nice to be here to remember Mary. She meant different things to many of us, but I think all of us, who were lucky enough to know her and work with her, shared in her generosity and her curiosity and her very supportive way of working with people. And when we launched this award back in 7 years ago, it was kind of 8 years ago, if you know what I mean, in terms of the lag time. It was kind of a shot in the dark. We didn't really know what to expect or what to get back, and we've learned ourselves over the years through our own successes and failures at trying to reach out to students. We're not necessarily the best at that, but we have found very helpful supporters in various colleges, and we've learned certain things about what works and what doesn't work, and we continue to fail, but we also continue to succeed. And one area in particular where we've managed to succeed, I think, is that every year we have unearthed 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4 very, very talented pieces of work. And I've always been very proud to stand over the winning entries, be they the overall winner or the Judges Special Highly Commended Awards. Every year they have been very good. And some of the people who actually succeeded in this award have actually gone on to succeed in international competitions as well. In fact, our inaugural winner, Ian Finnegan, she won a AAAS Science Communication Award at the US American Academy of Sciences for the advancement of science, rather. So there was some real talent there, not only about science in Ireland, but also science communication in Ireland. And of course, obviously, Mary herself was sort of the doyen of science communicators in this country. And I always like to think with the people who enter, and they obviously vary from, sometimes it's a first year student, sometimes it's a postgraduate student. Some people will definitely be heading in an academic direction and just do this anyway. Some people will maybe take a science communication route, and who knows, the future is unwritten for young people doing this kind of work. But it's just lovely to feel that Mary's legacy has touched them on their way, and in some way that hopefully they'll carry some memory of her into the future. So I want to sincerely thank everybody who entered the award this year, and in all the years gone by too. I sort of sometimes feel it would be great to get them all together at some point, if that was feasible. It probably isn't, but some of them, who knows, might be in space at some point, if not in Ireland. But I want to thank them first and foremost, because they're the people that make it worthwhile. I also then particularly want to thank the judges. We've kind of settled into a groove in the last few years that seems to work quite well, that we have a sort of a dream team, a permanent team of very supportive and incisive judges, some of whom are here tonight, but not all. But Anne Mulvihill is here somewhere, I think. Thank you, Anne. And Nigel Monaghan is here, yes. So Anne was a sister of Mary's. Nigel is recently retired keeper of the Natural History Museum of Ireland. And Carolyn Lillington, veteran tech journalist and columnist with the Irish Times, isn't here, but she's also been a very valuable member of the judging panel. And then what we've settled into the habit of is developing a kind of, or reaching out to a subject matter specialist, because the theme for the competition varies every year. So we do attempt to recruit somebody who's got key expertise in that area. And so energy was the topic that emerged on our Twitter poll this year as the theme. And Hannah Daly, there's no better person in this country, I think, to maybe to deal with that topic. She's one of those academics who really makes you question what the hell you're doing with your time. I mean, her level of productivity and the speed in which she's actually accomplished the early stage of her career is quite breathtaking. And I'm going to have to read out her actual job title. It's Professor in Sustainable Energy and Energy Systems Modelling at University College Cork. But what's also fascinating is that Hannah is originally a mathematician. So had her career taken another turn, she could well have ended up here rather than in UCC, who knows. But she's made that journey, and I think it's an honourable journey that many mathematicians have made, that they've started off as a mathematician and have moved into completely different fields. I mean, when I was a young microbiologist, failing badly in the lab in a very non-Beckettian sense, Antoine Danchin was a particular inspiration. He was at the Pasteur Institute in France, and he was into bacterial physiology, but he was a mathematician. And there's this extraordinary ability that mathematicians can sort of move in various directions, and physicists can do it too. It does not work in reverse. I'm not aware of any great microbiologist that became a great mathematician, but I am open to correction. But Hannah's work, I think, what I think is very, very noteworthy about her work is that not only as an academic has she excelled, but she's also, her level of engagement in the civic space and making extraordinarily strong and courageous stances on some of the key issues that face our society. It's quite inspiring that we have academics who are able to do that. And she's actively involved not only in the public sphere in terms of writing the Irish Times and blogging, regularly on RT radio, and I'm assuming television as well. And yes, I've seen you on TV. But also she is participating in the public or the policy formation process behind the scenes as well with government bodies and continuing her own work. So I think she's an academic that we can be very sort of grateful for, and we're also doubly grateful that you've given your time and your expertise and your sort of intellectual and moral authority to support us with this. So I'm going to hand over now to Hannah, who's going to do the honours. Thank you.
Thank you, Cormac. I'm not sure if I can live up to those expectations. Yeah. Until I became obsessed with energy, I was also obsessed with space, actually. And the personal connection, I met my husband at Blackrock Castle Observatory at a telescope pointed at Saturn. So we have a very, very, very close relationship with space. And I also once wanted to go to Mars, but I think that those days that ship has sailed, shall we say? That's the bad metaphor. But yeah, since I've become obsessed with energy, I suppose studied abroad when I was in university as an undergraduate in mathematics, and just found that this topic of energy is the most fascinating and important one that we face. And I recently gave my professorial inaugural lecture, and I was wondering, like, how should I approach this? And a colleague of mine said, be funny, make them laugh, and made me stress even more, because most of my work deals with existential crises and climate change, and I'm not naturally very funny, But I began the lecture with an anecdote I tell students sometimes, about two fish. Two fish are swimming along in a river, and an older, wiser fish passes them and says, "Lovely water today." And the older, wiser fish kind of moves along, and the two look at each other and they say, "What's water?" Okay, it's a little bit funny. And so I use this analogy to kind of as the energy system, as the energy that fuels our society, and which all of our technological and societal progress has really been underpinned by us needing an enormous amount of energy, of primary energy. It's the prime mover for everything that we do, and it's enabled the Industrial Revolution and all of the population growth, and the countries and everything that we know is underpinned by energy. But as we know, the vast majority of that energy comes from fossil fuels. So the thing that underpins our ability to do work, our species' ability to do things, is also the greatest threat that we have. And this is something that really strikes me. But this thing about the fish in the water, the original. I stole this analogy, like I'm sure most of these things are stolen. But it's not just about water, really. It's about everything. We can be in our day-to-day lives and really not appreciate everything that's going on around us. This space. The properties of Earth, nature, society. What is really going on here? This is, and I think that the practice of science, the practice of journalism, the practice of art, all of the thing that all of those things have in common is people asking, what is going on here? It's a very simple question, but it's very profound. And a book that was really very influential to me as a teenager was Sophie's World. I wonder if any of you and that image of the world being created like a magician pulling a white rabbit out of a top hat. And this person who's really trying, and we're all just kind of crawling in the skin of the rabbit and the base of the hair, kind of going about our day-to-day lives, not really appreciating that this amazing, majestic sort of mystery is being unfolded. And this book uses this imagery of a philosopher being the one that creeps out to the edge of the tip of the hair of the rabbit, and just trying to understand this mystery and trying to explain it. But I think that's what science is, as well as philosophy. That's what journalism is, trying to explain what's going on here, and that's what culture and what art is. And I think I'm sad to say I didn't know Mary, as many of you did, but I think from reading her works and kind of reading what people have said about her, there's few people I think who really encompass this person who's really crawling out to the edge of the tips of the hair of the rabbit and really trying to express that wonder of creation and really try to appreciate, try to communicate what is going on here. And I think that this evening's award, the Mary Mulvihill Association, and this is a really beautiful way to I suppose respect her memory and to make sure that the very, very important influence that she's had on Irish life, on the individuals and on the institutions that she engaged with, continues to reverberate. In the young students who are participating in this award, and so on. So yes, the theme, I suppose, of this year's prize was energy, and this is why I was brought in and very, very many thanks to the committee for inviting me into this really delightful judging process. And I'll speak a small bit about my own work, which is really trying to understand what's going on here in terms of the energy system, and I think we're all feeling it, whether explicitly in terms of our the price of energy to heat our homes, or that feeling of insecurity when we think about the threat of natural gas being cut off from geopolitical tension and war, or the feeling that we all really have now of this threat of climate change and this very stable, comfortable climate that our society has evolved in is now kind of exiting that nice safe space, and that we're entering a time of increasing climate instability and uncertainty because of our energy system. But we received, so the work that I do is really trying to put numbers and trying to interpret different futures for the energy system. So our work is fed into this carbon budget process that the Climate Change Advisory Council has recommended governments that we all need to now live not just within a money budget, but we need to live within a carbon budget. So we look at different pathways that the energy system can meet that, whether it's cutting down car use, installing solar panels, or really seeking a massive offshore wind industry. So looking at ways to replace our enormous reliance on fossil fuels that create such a risk. And I think I'll speak a little bit now about the different about the judging process and the different entries that we received, and it was a unique experience for me, and I really loved it. Very different from, it was a nice break from marking hundreds of exams and essays that my students do, and writing academic papers or writing articles. So this was very nice. So we received essays and different formats of submissions. For example, on the evolution of photosynthetic bacteria and algae and their future as a potential energy source. So we received, descriptions and technical reports on wind turbines and how they work. We even received a submission which was like a short play, a conversation between two characters in a pub. So we received a delightful array of different ideas about energy in different formats, which was exactly within the spirit of this prize and this award, which is to tell us, to tell the story of energy in a very creative way. And we have two. We're delighted to have two. One overall winner and one award winner who was to receive the Judges Highly Commended Award. And I'll start with maybe this Ashik Prasad, who has won the Judges Highly Commended Award for his entry on golden jellyfish and solar energy. So he produced a delightful slideshow with his own original art, and it was animated with his own original art. I wish we could show some of it here, actually, but maybe we'll be able to later on, which described the life cycle of a jellyfish species that we'd never heard of, called the Mastigaias jellyfish. Maybe you can explain to us. It's actually a combination of a symbiotic relationship of different jellyfish species which inhabit a particular lake on an island in the Western Indian Ocean, whose life cycle follows the sun. So he really considered his audience beautifully and came up with this wonderful, colourful entry that was age appropriate, charming, and really delightful. So I'd like to invite Ashik Prasad, who's a student of TCD, to come and receive. And I want to say a few more words before we get to our winner, because I found this a wonderful entry. So it was basically an essay about the role of science fiction as a way to kind of conceptualize our future energy system in this delightful graphic novel format. And I hope this will be published as well. And before I introduce the winner, I want to speak a little bit about this, because I mean this really touched me as well, because science fiction is not just a way of understanding very radically different futures. I think science fiction is almost a more appropriate way of understanding what's going on right now. You know, technological progress or development is happening at a really rapidly accelerating rate, so rapid that if you read a book about the present, it's already out of date. So, and I'm reading a wonderful book called The Great Derangement, which tries to understand why current culture and current like regular forms of novels or regular art is not really engaging with the climate crisis at all. And it tries to understand why this theme of massive natural disasters and so on, or radical new technologies is not kind of filtering in through normal cultural processes. And it talks about culture also being in crisis, and that the climate crisis is an expression of that. They have this expression that something is so unbelievable that you wouldn't believe it if it, or something is so unpredicted that you wouldn't believe it if it was in a novel or in a movie. But science fiction gives us this ability to really grow that space of what is potentially possible. And science fiction is also kind of an expression of this futures that we try to model in our energy systems models. That's part of my practice, or in these IPCC reports that talk about how 2050 needs to look like if we're to address climate change. Or it can be a way to express the great threat of very different climates and how society might affect that. So the winner was Ayomide, who is a fourth year student in UCC's Bachelor of Science in Microbiology. And she won this top prize for this richly illustrated digital essay, imagining the future of energy through science fiction. And science fiction, as she says, offers us this perspective on current issues, and both good and bad, both dystopian themes. They're useful because they allow us to consider the potential outcomes of our decisions, but importantly, she concludes, science fiction reminds us that the future is not fixed. We control the events in our story, and that we have all the strategies we need to create a better, more sustainable world for everyone. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the winner, Ayomide, to the podium. Okay, so that's all I have. Thank you all very much for coming. And,
Thanks, Anna. I don't know if either if our winners would like to say something. Would you like to come up and say a few words first?
Hello, I'm Ashik. It feels great to be here. Firstly, I want to thank you for this recognition and for this whole opportunity. And I want to say, like 3 months ago on a Wednesday, just like today, I was in this lecture, a science communication lecture, and that's when I first heard about this program. And at that point, I was like, maybe I could give it a go, and I did. And that led me to this moment, which I'm very grateful to. And I really did enjoy the whole experience. I got to learn a lot about a great scientist. And it's an honor to be a part of this program, celebrating the life and work of Mary Mulvihill. And a few weeks ago, I was really excited to come in. And, just before entering through the door, I was really nervous. But, everyone was so welcoming and nice. So that made it easy. So thank you all. Thank you.
I'm extremely honored to have received this award, and I'd like to thank all the judges and everyone who was involved in organizing this event. My entry was inspired by my knowledge of Mary Mulvihill's use of storytelling to describe the stories and historical background of science in Ireland. Science and storytelling often work very well together to inspire and educate others. So I wanted to adopt this approach when I was exploring the theme of energy. And I decided to use science fiction as my medium because it effectively constitutes the stories of science. And I discovered that even the fictional worlds of sci-fi can reflect the truths of our reality. A reminder that storytelling can be very powerful to spark curiosity and inspire change and thought. Thank you.
Okay, we're nearly finished. There's some nibbles and drinks downstairs for anyone who can stay around for a little bit longer. But just before we wrap up, my first task is to present a copy of Mary's book. I'd also like to thank Niamh and Hannah for all their work on this. I didn't think it was appropriate to give you a copy of Mary's book because I assume you both have one. However, I have here a copy of the book, Her Keys to the City. I don't know if you know about this, it was published last year. It's short biographies of 80 women who have been influential in shaping modern Dublin. And Mary's in it. Okay, so finally, I'd like to thank everyone on the committee for all the work they've done in organising this event and making all this happen. I'd just like to mention that one other thing that we're doing at the moment is there's going to be an exhibition in the Little Museum of Dublin in autumn on based on Mary's chapter in the book on Dublin about science in Dublin and also strongly commemorating Mary. So that's Nigel and Fiona are instrumental in organising this, and hopefully that'll be opening in the autumn. That is the end of the formal proceedings for this evening. So we can close at that now. And as I say, there's nibbles and drinks downstairs. Thank you for coming.